Hey, what's up? This video is going to be an update to my older multipass denoising video. It's going to correct some mistakes that I made and hopefully answer some questions from the comments. Some of these questions on the older video were about setting up additional passes like volume, emission, and environment, and some people said that glass shaders were blacked out. I'm going to address each of these things with the scene that I prepared for this video. We have an HDRI providing the environment, lighting, and sky. We have a volume object providing haze in the distant background. We have emission textures in the lamps right here. Not doing much in a daytime scene, but you can see the reflections in the top of the lamp. And also, we have a glass bottle sitting here on the sidewalk. Before I get to the multipass denoising setup, I'm going to go over basic denoising for new viewers. If you don't need this, please feel free to use the chapters to skip ahead. In this example, I rendered the scene without any denoising. You can see how grainy and dirty the sequence looks, and this is what we refer to as noise. With denoising, we can easily clean this up and get a result that looks like this. Let me hop back into Blender and let's look in the Render Properties tab. I'm going to keep my settings the same for each example in this video. I'm using the Cycles Render Engine. My device setting is GPU Compute. In the Sample drop-down menu, the Viewport drop-down and the Render drop-down look very similar. Make sure that you're looking in the render area. I have the noise threshold disabled and the samples set to 96. Here's a side tip related to samples that might help with your render. Let's say, for example, that you're rendering a scene in 1080 resolution with denoising, but it's still a little noisy. You might think about increasing the samples to improve the render, but you will probably get better results and a faster render if you keep the samples low and increase the resolution. You'll have to experiment with which values work best in your scene. Under light paths, I've seen videos where people have the total at 12 and change all the other bounces to 4. Then they turn off the reflective and refractive caustics. Don't automatically do that every time. There are circumstances when this can help lower your render time at the cost of losing some detail, but sometimes it doesn't help at all. So render a test frame each way and compare. If it doesn't really have a big impact on the render time, leave it the way it was as default. Under memory, I seem to get better results when I use tiling. In the Output Properties tab, I'm using OpenEXR as the file format, half float, DWAA lossy. These settings keep your image file sizes low but preserve more details than PNG files. After you render animation, you will still import the EXRs as an image sequence and render to video the same as you would with a PNG image sequence. Next, I'm going back to Render Properties and also go to the Compositing tab up here. Enable Use Nodes, and you should have these nodes show up by default. If you don't see them, you can hold Shift and press A to search for and add them. Over here in the Render Properties under the Render dropdown, if you toggle off and on the denoise setting, you will see that it adds a noisy image socket to the Render Layers node. Make sure this is enabled. Next, go to the View Layers Property tab right here and enable Denoising Data. This added these additional sockets to the Render Layers node. Move your mouse pointer back to the main window, hold Shift and press A. Click on Search and type Denoise. Select it and drop it right here in the middle of these other two nodes. Let's drag this out a little to make some space. And now we're going to connect the denoising albedo to albedo, the denoising normal to normal, and the noisy image to image. Make sure this image socket is connected to the composite image socket. Hold Ctrl and Shift, then left-click on the denoise node. This will automatically add and connect a viewer socket. This allows you to see the frames here in the Compositing tab if you want to add more nodes and make any adjustments. That's all you need to do to set up the basic denoising. One more tip here, if you go back to the Layout tab, your frames will render faster in solid mode than they will in Render Preview, so click this. Go to Output Properties, make sure you have a destination folder selected to save your frames in. Go up here to the Render tab and choose Render Animation. This will take a little while, but I'm going to show you what to do with the image sequence once it's done. Once all of your frames are rendered, save your Blender file and close it. Open a new Blender file and on this top row of tabs, click on this plus sign. Go to the Video Editing menu and click on Video Editing. Next, click this Add button then click on Image Sequence. Find the folder where you saved your rendered frames. Select them all by pressing A, and then click Add the image strip. Right-click on the image strip and choose Set Render Size. This will make your output video the same resolution as the frames in the image strip. Go to Output Properties, change End to match the number of frames you previously rendered. In Output, click the folder and choose where to save the video. Change the file format to FFmpeg video. Open the encoding menu and change the container from Matroska to MPEG-4. Make sure the codec is H.264. Change the output quality to perceptually lossless. And you can leave the encoding speed on good, but I like to change it to slowest for better compression. It still renders pretty quickly, even though it says slowest. Next, go to the render menu and choose Render Animation. You should be able to see a very noticeable difference between the newly denoised video and any previous attempts without denoising. This is a big improvement, but we can get even better results with multipass denoising. This video on the left is the render I just made with only one denoising node, and the video on the right is a render using multipass denoising. Notice how the render on the left has less detail in the wall texture here compared to here. This looks very smooth and artificial. In the distance, look at this group of windows. Almost no detail, and on the right, it looks much more realistic. Same thing with the stone wall. There's more detail here, and the storefront looks more realistic too. Even the haze seems like it has more definition. If I skip to the last frame where the camera is zoomed in, on the right, you can see more detail in the reflection on the post. The text on the posters stands out a little better. Everything looks better. Next, I'll walk you through setting up the multipass denoising. Go to the Compositing tab. Make sure Use Nodes as active. You should have these nodes here by default. If not, search and add them. While you're doing that, I like to add the search bar to Quick Favorites. Hold Shift and press A, then right-click on Search and Add to Quick Favorites. Now I can just press Q anytime I want to bring up the search bar to find a node. Press Q, click on Search, and type Denoise. Then drop the node over here. Press N to hide the side panel. And in the render properties, we can disable denoise because we don't need this noisy image socket. Go to the View Layer Properties tab and enable denoising data. We now have a few denoising sockets available to use. Instead of using a combined image like this or the noisy image that we just got rid of, we'll use the individual passes. Still in the View Layer Properties tab, under Light, enable these passes. You can left-click and drag down over the boxes to quickly add them. In most cases, you won't need ambient occlusion or shadow catcher, but if you do, just follow the same steps here to add them at the end of the chain. We need to make some space. Zoom out a little using the scroll wheel. Drag these two over here, then drag this one over here. We can disconnect this for now, holding Control, right-click, and drag. Connect the diffuse direct to the image socket of the denoise node. Connect the denoising normal to normal, and connect the denoising albedo to albedo. Select this node and hold Shift and press D to duplicate. Connect the diffuse indirect to image. Hold Shift, right-click, and drag to add these points. Holding Control with this move cuts the connection. Holding Shift adds these sockets. Connect the denoising albedo to albedo and denoising normal to normal. Minimize and rearrange these to save some space. To move these sockets, you have to select them and press G to grab. Press Q and search for a mix color node. Change the blend mode to add. Duplicate the node and change the blend mode to multiply. Okay, now don't do this part, just watch. The way I did this in the older video was to multiply the diffuse color to the direct and indirect and then add them together. I've done it this way many times and it worked fine for me. I don't know if this was ever correct, but it's not correct now. Here's a screenshot from the Blender manual and it shows that we should add the direct and indirect, then multiply color. So going back to Blender, give me a second to reset all this. Add these two together by connecting the yellow sockets. Connect this to this, then grab the diffuse color and multiply it in. We can add a point here to drag this line up and keep our workspace clean. Box select the nodes and also grab the extra sockets. Then hold Shift and press D to duplicate the whole set and drop it here. Connect the glossy direct to the top here. Connect the glossy indirect to here. Connect the denoising normal. Then connect the denoising albedo. Now connect the glossy color to the multiply node. Box select this group, duplicate, and repeat for the transmission passes. These transmission passes should take care of any issues you might have had with glass textures. The volume passes don't have a color, only a direct and indirect, so duplicate the denoise and add nodes we don't need to multiply. Connect the direct and indirect, connect the normal and the albedo. The emission and environment passes are usually very clean, so we don't need to denoise them, but they still have to be added to the overall composite of passes. Let's start adding these together. Duplicate an add node, then connect the next chain down each time you duplicate. Do the same thing for the emission and the environment passes. Once you get to this point, connect to the composite node. Go to Output Properties. You can use OpenEXR multilayer if you plan on later editing the individual passes of the rendered image sequence, but the output files will be much larger. For this tutorial, use OpenEXR, half float, DWAA lossy. Make sure you choose the folder where you want to save the sequence. Finally, go to the Render tab and choose Render Animation. Once that process is complete, you can follow the steps I described earlier in this video to convert your image sequence into a final video render. Each example that I've used in this video is identical except for the denoising method. All of the samples and render settings are the same. Render times for the noisy video were about 20 seconds per frame. The render time for the basic denoising was about 27 seconds per frame, and the render time for the multipass denoising was an average of about 55 seconds per frame. You can search up how to adjust the noise threshold in render properties to make this even faster. I've had some projects where the render times for basic denoising and multipass denoising were a lot closer to being almost the same. Multipass just takes a little bit longer, but each project is different. I've had some projects before I started using this where the render times were sometimes 5 minutes per frame or more. If I can make renders of this quality for 55 seconds on average per frame, I'm okay with that. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day or night or whatever it is where you're from.